Hey everyone! So in this video today we're going to be talking about how to start a garden in fall and why fall is the best time to do that. And we're also going to be talking about cover crops and how to use cover crops in the home garden, because it tends to be a little different than using them in a market garden or a high production type setting. And I will tell you what I do, and I will talk to you about where I get my seeds and things like that. So if you are only interested in the cover crop portion of this, I'll put a timestamp right here and you can just skip to that. But if you're interested in more what we're planting and how we're moving and our expansion of our garden, go ahead and watch the whole video and I'll show you exactly what we're doing, and I will talk to you about the process and why. So we are starting our week out harvesting broccoli. We have had some really lovely cold nights in the 40s, but still during the day we've had some get into the 80s, and you can see our broccoli is starting to flower when it starts to twist and turn, and you can see some of them are just slightly open. But even still, the homegrown broccoli, you take it, we brought it in, we steamed it. There wasn't the least bit of bitterness at all. It was just absolutely delicious. All the kids ate a huge bowl full, and we wished we had more, but there is more coming. The garden is full of heads that'll be close to ready, probably closer to Thanksgiving. So we are going through and harvesting a bunch of broccoli, and I don't think we're going to have enough to actually preserve any because we are eating it so quickly as it comes in. But we're probably doing about a head per person per meal. Even some of the bigger heads, it's just so delicious. And if you have extra to preserve, that's great, but you really get the most nutrition out of eating it fresh out of the garden. So that is what we're doing. So this was our first broccoli. It was sown in August. This is mostly Fiesta and Desico. So it was sown in August in soil blocks, and then we planted it out in September, and it is now, mid-November when we're doing this harvest. And you can see the heads are nice size. That one was probably about 7 inches across, but the majority of them have been between 4 and 6 inches across. And something else we've also been doing is we are expanding the garden for next year. And we're trying to do it in fall instead of in spring, because actually the best time to establish a new garden is in fall. Even if whether you till or whether you don't till, we do not like tillage. We don't till regularly, but we do till to break ground. We live in South Carolina, Zone 7B, and South Carolina soil is red clay, which is not a bad thing. Clay is absolutely wonderful to grow in. However, it does come with the compaction issue. So clay soil is great. Compaction is the problem. A lot of times people will say, oh, I can't grow anything outside or not in pots or not in raised beds because I have clay soil. Clay soil is wonderful. Clay soil is filled with minerals and all kinds of wonderful, wonderful things. So it's not your clay soil, it's the problem, it's the compaction, which that issue can easily be addressed. And there's a lot of different ways to address it. We are choosing to do an initial till. Now this ground is so hard that you can even see, now it is fall, but none of the grass even grew here. It is like kind of a very stiff, almost like a sagey weed that grows along the top of here. So I know it's kind of crazy to put a garden here, but this is the space we have to do it. So we had this tiller, it was given to us by a family member. We put a new motor on it. And we did probably 80 to 100 passes just to break ground. When we were putting up our fence, if you've seen our other videos, we have a big privacy fence. When we were putting up the fence and putting the 4x4 posts in, my husband and some friends were putting in the posts with a gas drill auger, where you just drill down. And it should have been very simple, but the ground was actually so hard that it broke the gas drill auger. It broke the bit off of it. So you can see this is a rear line tiller. This is what's necessary to break ground where we are. And the soil's in perfect condition. So you don't want soil to be very, very dry. You don't want it to be very, very wet. You want it to slick. So if you can take a little chunk of it and squish and slide your finger and it just slicks just nice, that is the perfect type of moisture content in your soil for tilling. If it's too wet, it will hurt your tiller and it'll get big clobby glops. And it'll be really hard on it won't get as fluffy. If it's too dry, it kind of just throws dust everywhere. So slicking is the type you want. We had a good rain last week, really a lot of rain. And so we let it soak into the ground and we got it all tilled this week. We did 4 40-foot beds for our new garden. Now this is our current garden, and here you can see over here to the side, we are going to walk over, and we did 2 rows here, and then we have a strawberry row. So you can see we did 36 inches on 2 rows, and then we did 24 on this row, because this is just going to be 2 rows of strawberries. We're taking our strawberries out of the main garden. We're going to give them their own bed. I wanted to do more of an acidic soil. I wanted to be able to fertilize them so that they can have a prolonged burying and not go to runners. And something else I wanted to show, though, I'm going to quick slip it in right here. Speaking of fertilizing and things, we have seen some deficiency in our perennial cover crop. So in some of my other videos, I've talked about perennial cover cropping. We have about 6 plants here. We're just doing a little experiment. So on this broccoli, you can see the new leaves are purple. So if the bottom leaves are yellow or purple, that's fine. That's broccoli and brassicas will shed their bottom leaves. But if the new leaves are purple that are coming up and out, or if the stems are turning purple, that's a sign of a deficiency. So you can see we took a drill auger, we put it in the ground, we planted these. This was the only plant that didn't get compost in its hole. We just planted it straight in the ground. And the perennial cover crop is to help microorganisms in the microbiome of the plants, having a diverse cover crop. And you'll see cover crop come in like mixes. You want the different biology to attract different microorganisms, and that all coincides. There's no such thing as a monoculture in nature. So we were just experimenting with perennial cover cropping. It seems okay, but like I said, we've noticed a little deficiency here. So it's just a kind of an update on our perennial cover crops. And this is just our grass. It's rye, clover, I think Kentucky blue. It's not really anything special as far as cover crop mixes go. But speaking of cover crops, we are going to cover crop all of our new beds except for the strawberry bed. So what I'm doing here is inoculating. Inoculant is so you get little nodules. If you can see on this vetch I'm holding, we have some vetch in the main garden. It's got little nodules on the roots, and those nodules are from the plant that actually gathers and fixes nitrogen from the air, stores it in its roots, and then it will flower, and upon potting, it will use that nitrogen. So to get those nodules, you have to have the correct bacteria in your soil. So inoculating is basically using a lab-grown bacteria and putting it on your legume type of plants. So like I'm going to do some dwarf Oregon peas right here. These are common for cover crops just because they don't get super tall. And they're actually delicious. We planted some just to eat, and we were surprised how much we liked them. But so I'm going to soak the peas. Soaking always helps, especially if you're broadcasting. I don't have a seeder, so I'm not going to go through and plant all these peas by hand. So I am going to broadcast them and just kind of throw some dirt and compost on top. But I'm going to soak them to give them a head start. And then I have them in this inoculant, which is the correct bacteria to make sure it forms those nodules. And you do this by weight. So you weigh the amount of peas you have, then you weigh the amount of inoculant you have, and you just this is called a slurry method. It just soaks it. You can also buy things pre-inoculated. I have a fall cover crop that has some vetch and some Australian cow peas in it, field peas, and that came pre-inoculated. So after we tilled, we came in here and I raked out the grass, and then we came in and I tried to smooth it out best I could. And you can see we have some bags down here. These are from a local dairy. So right behind us is a dairy called Happy Cow Creamery, and they've been around forever, and they have some really wonderful pasture management. They are a grass-fed dairy. They are very particular about how they feed their cows, and I am 100% confident that there is no herbicide or anything like that. They only use sorghum Sudan grass, and I know buying compost from them is safe. We have had problems with certain herbicide damage in another garden at an old house of ours, and it was really sad, and it took out the garden for more than one season, and it was also a lot of money to fix, which we didn't even fully fix it. It was just kind of on its way to being fixed, and then we had to move. So herbicide damage is no joke. PFAS is something else that gets into a lot of composts. It's called the forever chemical. It's from waterproofing items that are decomposed, and it lasts in your soil forever. It does affect your plants. It affects our bodies, but I don't bring a lot of things in. That is why I'm confident that buying from our creamery next to us, right outside our back door, about a road or two down, is a safe thing to do. But otherwise, I really don't bring in much. And on that note of fertilizing with manure, you don't want to fertilize with manure all the time, like every amendment, because if you continue just adding more and more composted manure, you will have excess phosphorus in your soil, and it can lead to phosphorus runoff in the waterways. But even more importantly, the phosphorus gets really tied up in your soil, and you have to go through a long process of trying to get it out. So you don't want to just continuously use manure, but for new beds, I usually put it in just once, and I would honestly suggest once every 5 years if you're just doing like a summer garden. But if you're, using summer, spring, fall, keeping your garden constantly planted, probably using manure once every 3 years would be okay. Manure is wonderful, and a lot of times it gets people really good results, but you do have to be careful because it'll eventually lead to over phosphorus in your soil, and that's just heartbreaking when you have so much invested in it. So what we're doing here is we're making raised rows for our strawberries. So this is not the ideal time to do strawberries. Fall is, but we kind of missed the mark a little bit because we were working on our tiller and we couldn't quite get it done in time. But fall is a good time, but this is late in our fall. I should have done it at the beginning of our fall. We're almost in winter now. Luckily, we have a mild winter, and strawberries are frost hardy, so we will see how it goes, but I want to make sure they have a jump start. So we are going to just do a little bit extra than I probably would have done had I got them in at the correct time. So we're going to do a raised row. We're going to do two rows on each side, and I will show you where our strawberry plants, I had fertilized them for runners, and that they turned into just kudzu, honestly. I probably should have just left them alone. They still would have had plenty of runners. So we have plenty of strawberries. We're actually thinking about doing another row next year. So I don't want to rip them all out because I want to make sure if some of these don't take in the fall that I can replace them in the spring. But this way, having them in their own row, I can fertilize them to continuously produce for us. But I want to make sure it is nice and wet and soaked through. And on top of that, I wanted to do this on a cloudy, overcast day. You can see that the lighting is very, very, very cloudy. It's going to be raining in the next 2 days, which is good for anything you're going to plant. Now these 2 rows are getting our cover crop. I want to make sure the soil is completely saturated and soaked for the cover crop as well. Like I said, I'm broadcasting it, which means I'm just kind of taking a handful and throwing it down. And then it will, germinate. So you want to make sure it's really, really soaked well. And like I said, I'm a little behind on my planting. So I probably should have done this October 15th-ish, mid-October. It's mid-November right here. It's a little late, but luckily the fall has been good to us. We've had a nice, light, lovely fall. It's been cool with a couple hot days here and there, but it hasn't been any frost in the night except for one time. It was the day after Halloween. We had a hard frost for a day or two, and then it was done, and we haven't had one since. So I've gotten really, really lucky on that this year. So you can see I'm picking out the best kudzu. I'm just kidding. The best strawberries. And we're going to come through and we're going to plant them and we're going to get them in. And I'm hoping this will be a better way for us to do strawberries for our family next fall. And I'm willing to put in a lot of effort on these strawberries because strawberries in the store are very, very expensive. And so this is something that I do want to grow a lot of. that really holds a lot to my decision making when I decide what I'm planting and how much effort and how much money I'm willing to put into it in the garden, is how much does it actually cost to buy it in the store. You know, something that costs quite a lot, like fresh strawberries, I'm willing to put more time into. Same thing with peppers. Peppers cost a lot. Now, this is something I like to use when I'm doing any transplants. This is homeopathy and Rescue Remedy, which is kind of like homeopathy. So it works vibrationally. I use aconite for shock, and then Rescue Remedy is good. It's kind of hard to explain what it is. A lot of people call it the Bach flower, but it's not just one flower. It's actually a mix of many, many things. There are people who are they go to school just to learn about Rescue Remedy and the Bach flower. And it's a mix of roots and bark and all different kinds of things to make Rescue Remedy. But plants respond amazing to it. I have never had shock on my plants. I've never had anything that has deterred them after planting. And so I always do this after I plant. I just water them in. You see I have this 5-gallon bucket, and I just did like 2 squirts and then 1 little drop. That was it. It's all I need for the whole thing. And you mix it, make sure the little tablets are dissolved, and then you water it in. And you can continue as long as you don't empty the bucket, filling it with more water, because like I said, it's vibration. It's just adding that vibration to the water. Plants respond very well to vibration. So that is how we water them in. And that is how we make sure they don't go through a shock period of any sort, and they have the best start that they can. Something else that is really important is mulching. So you can see, and a lot of times I think our eyes have been trained to see like the nice black dark soil with the bright green plants in it all in a row. We're kind of trained that that's just how a garden should look. But really, a garden needs mulch. The soil should not be showing at all. So I am going to use some chopped up mulch leaves. Leaves do tend as a mulch to have the problem of blowing away. It's not ideal, but hopefully my frost fabric will help keep some of the mulch in place. But leaves are, in my opinion, the ideal mulch. And other mulches, such as hay and straw and things, like I said, they can have the possibility to have herbicide on them, which can affect your plants and their growth. It especially affects things like nightshades and things like legumes. But we are going to get our dried and mulched leaves that we collected. We have, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 big pin oak trees in our on our property, and that is all the leaves that we have and use. And then we cut our own grass, and that is what we use for mulching our garden, and that is what we use for compost. So we will go through and rake them, and then we will drive over them with the mower, pick them up, and bring them back and dump them in the compost area. And I find it is the best form of carbon. I really, really like leaves, but like I said, they do have the tendency to blow away. And one more thing about leaves is when you do them too thickly, they can actually kind of create a mat that repels water, and then you're not getting water where you want it in your plants. So that's the only thing about leaves that you have to just be a little careful of when you're using it. But mulching is such an important part of gardening, no matter what kind of gardening you're doing. And then one more precaution that I'm going to take for the strawberries is frost fabric. So frost fabric is kind of like this fleecy fabric. It does let water through, it does let sunlight through, and there's different grades of it. So the thicker will let less light through, but it will be more protected. So if you have something that's, you're going to get down to 10 degrees at night, you'll need the thicker stuff, where we're only getting down into maybe 25. So I actually have the lightest frost fabric. And strawberries are frost hardy, but it's just because I'm planting them at not the ideal time that I want to give them a jump start. Now we have these little green hoops that came with the frost fabric. They're okay. Some have broken. They're not as tall as I need them to be usually. They're good for strawberries or lettuce or something. But what we have made, and we really, really like, is we take 9-gauge wire, and it's way easier to push in the ground, and we just cut it however big we need it. And we have used that for the hoops, and it has worked just even better. I like it better than the hoops that come with it. So, and it's way, way cheaper too. And it's getting our wire at a place like Tractor Supply is also a lot cheaper, and then getting it at Lowe's or something Lowe's and Home Depot sell it like a pre and a roll, where at some place like Tractor Supply, we can get it cut just however much length they have on like a giant roll, and then they cut it for you, put a band on it, and then that's how you buy it. And we have really liked that. We're going to have some more that we're going to make. Maybe I'll do a video on that and show you guys how we measure it out to make nice tall ones. We have some that we even put some PEX piping on, which is like a PVC pipe, but honestly, I don't think that's necessary. I think just the wire is fine. And you can see my Foss fabric is not long enough. I thought I had a 40-foot row cover, but I had about a 20-foot row cover, so we will experiment and see if half of the strawberries in the row cover do better than the ones not. And we'll see if it was even necessary. I'll keep you guys updated on that come spring. And now for our cover crop. So these 2 rows are getting cover crop. You can see I'm just kind of sprinkling it down. The peas have absorbed all of the water that I put in the bowl, and on them is that bacteria that I need for them, the inoculant. Now peas are recommended to be drilled, and what that means is they're meant to be done with like a seeder, where something can like break the soil and put the pea down in it and then cover it back up. But I don't have a seeder. I needed to do a lot of peas, so far it seems like we've walked out the last couple mornings and they are sprouting. So hopefully they will be just fine in there, and we'll see how that goes. If not, maybe we're going to have to look into either planting them by hand or perhaps looking at getting like a used seeder just for cover crops. And then what I'm planting here is the giant till radishes. I can't think what they're called. Oh, daikon radish. So daikon radishes are great for compaction, supposedly, but what I think you need to realize with all cover crops is you're not going to get a harvest from it. So the daikon radish is meant to be in the ground. They get huge and thick, big, chunky, long tap roots, but you're meant to leave them in there and let them kind of turn to mush over the winter. That way it kind of adds organic matter deep down in the soil, and that's what helps keep it loose and compact. And then also in this bag is a cover crop mix, which I got from Territorial Seeds. Highly recommend Territorial Seeds. I like them a lot. They have a cover crop mix that's pre-inoculated, and this one had vetch and winter rye and annual rye, crimson clover, along with some Australian field peas and some brassicas. I forget which one. It had just a slew of different things in there. And like I said before, like with the perennial cover crop, when you're doing a cover crop, there's different reasons you can do it. Sometimes people do like peas and oats for a mulch because they're trying to grow their own mulch. Sometimes you do it for the fact that you want to make sure living roots are in the soil all the time. And that's what we're doing it for. We're doing it to build soil organic matter, and we're doing it to keep living roots in the soil after we've broken ground. Because if the soil is not being fed by the roots of the plants, then the soil is feeding on itself. Because if there's no plants in it, then there's no carbon cycle happening. And if there's no carbon cycle happening, then all the microorganisms that are in that dirt or soil are dying. So you got to keep something in there. And that's why I'm really interested in relay cropping, which is basically planting your next crops before your other ones come out. It's super interesting to me. Small space, high production. We're working on it for next year with our garden plan. So after I sowed all the cover crops, I broadcasted them. I'm going to go through with some compost and just dump it on top. And I'm hoping this is going to keep the birds away from it and keep the seeds from blowing away. Like rye seeds are very, very tiny. And also some of the bigger seeds like the vetch and the peas and the till radish need to be covered. So it just being on top of the soil, like rye will germinate and be fine. But other things need to be more in the soil. And so that's why I'm just kind of sprinkling this over top just to try and help it be covered up. I'm also going to put a very, very light layer of mulch on top. If I go too heavy with the mulch on top of seeds, they'll try to come up and they won't make it to the light in time. So I have to be really careful, just a teensy bit of the leaves on top. Thank you so much for being here with me. If you have any questions about using cover crops in the home garden or where to get cover crops, and if you have any questions on fall, starting gardens in the fall, please put it down in the comments. I'd love to answer your questions. We are always so grateful for you guys watching, and I will keep you up to date with a video next week on all the happenings that are going on around here. We are so grateful for you all. See you next week.